Hello, and welcome to the Ultimate Strategy Podcast, your go-to podcast for everything strategy. Now, each week we'll share a new episode covering a wide range of topics designed to help your business grow smarter by making strategy both approachable and actionable. I'm Davina Patel, Strategy Execution Director at Cascade.
And I'm Laura Blackmore, Head of Strategy Execution. Welcome to today's episode. We're going to be talking about how or what you should do when creating your first strategy team. We're excited to have you with us, and this is just the beginning, so stay tuned for weekly episodes which drop on a Thursday. Before we dive in, let me thank today's sponsor, Cascade. Cascade is the #1 strategy execution platform that helps turn visions into reality by working as the strategic brain of your organization. Thousands of businesses around the world use Cascade to plan, execute, and track their strategies in one place, improving efficiency and speeding up decision-making. By successfully executing strategies, Cascade customers are making a huge difference, from deploying life-saving vaccines to engineering the fastest Formula One car. If you want to get your team moving towards your vision in one central platform, check us out at www.cascade.app, and we'll leave the link in the episode notes. Now, let's get started. Davina, I'm super excited about this week's topic on, so you've created a strategy team, now what? Why don't you kick us off with what this really means?
So first of all, I'd probably say great foundation that you've actually kicked off a strategy department or a strategy role within your business. That's absolutely step zero to this. And now when we think about what comes next, the almost initial aspect to tackle is defining your team's purpose and your objective. I think every team within a business should have their own version of a mission statement, and making sure that your team and your department truly understands its purpose within the organization is important. Ultimately, a strategy team or personnel is responsible for the long-term planning, market analysis, and driving innovation in your business. So it's important to define the scope of what you do. And alongside that, clear objectives. What are you trying to uncover? What are you actively going to work on? And this could include developing strategy, optimizing current strategy or processes, and potentially identifying new growth opportunities. And in my previous experience as well with some of my customers, you can also see how when you kick off this journey, it's super important to ground yourself in that team's purpose and vision, and how it ultimately contributes to that organization's kind of growth and future. So definitely the first place to start. And maybe Laura, what do you think comes next after this?
I think definitely my next recommendation would be looking at the current situation, and probably before you even formed the strategy team, you've done some sort of analysis on the business. You know, maybe it's grown rapidly and there's no real central function kind of anchoring the business. So you probably already have a baseline analysis of some kind, but I would really encourage a SWOT analysis where it's pretty detailed, the strengths and the weaknesses of the organization, but also the opportunities and threats as well. And that can really help you as a strategy team, or a one-person strategy team, as it's probably starting out with, to understand where the company currently stands and identify areas for improvement. And I'll talk a little bit later on about how you don't have to do that alone, and how you can really use other people in the organization to help you. So we'll come back to that. But I think the second most important piece is using data. So using data and insights, whether that's from last year's strategy or last year's sort of internal resources to external sources such as market trends, financial performance, what your competitors are doing, customer feedback, hugely important as well. And I think that will really help serve as that foundation for that strategic decision making. I'd love to talk a little bit about kind of what you do once you've assessed the current situation. Obviously, it doesn't stop there with the analysis. I talked a moment ago about how you can utilize other people in the business. And I think one really important recommendation, or something that I've seen really work in organizations, is to build an army of people, whether that's senior leadership or other stakeholders within the business, where you can actually have an army of people that work with you and work for you as a central strategy team, but really give you those nuggets of information that'll help you to pivot and drive the strategy. It also serves as almost external group of people that can really help embed the strategic culture that you need inside the business. So that's something that I've seen work really successfully. How else, Davina, do you think that engagement with leaders or stakeholders would really help, do you think?
I really like that. I like the notion of creating an army. And I also think about more broadly the IKEA effect, right? When you have intrinsically been involved with building something, you are motivated by it. You are in with the team that you're doing this with. So I really like that notion. And I think alignment is super key for the execution of your strategy as well, making sure that your leadership is on board and your respective team leads, business unit leads, but also the individual contributors. And it's almost imperative, I would say, to make sure that you build your plan and you co-create your plan from this together, which would be the next step. How do you develop a plan of strategy, kind of planning, execution, and beyond, and tracking that everybody is bought into, everybody feels motivated by, everybody feels aligned to, and that you're all driving the ship in the same direction? And that is really where some of the intrinsic parts of your plan, so whether it's building out strategic goals and objectives, identifying priorities and creating KPIs and the right measures, comes into it. The detail feels a lot more easier to start to complete when you're all heading in the same direction, I'd say.
Something I'd love that you made me think about, actually. This week I was working with an organization. They have a fairly new central strategy team, but what was really fascinating to see was that actually a lot of their developing the strategic plan was built from the business bottom up, and almost the job of the strategy team or how I supported them was, okay, we want all of that knowledge and the bottom up planning to come from your functions and the teams, because they're in the weeds, they know what needs to be done. And the central strategy team don't really know all of the facets and nuances to this quite complicated business. But where their role really came into effect was they took all of this work that's happening across the teams and then really started to think, okay, we have a few themes here. We have a theme around processes, and we have some themes around business growth and how we can elevate sort of the growth of the business as we transition through this new phase. But also then they had themes around their people and recruitment efforts. They had themes around new geographical locations. So it started to sort of pinpoint areas of focus for the business. So what that strategy team was able to do is then say, okay, we can really drive this business forward by really focusing on these big themes. So they kind of bought that strategic element, which is a bit easier said than done. But I think that really helped solidify and give feedback then to the teams that, yes, they are working on quite critical components and they're thinking very tactically, but let's elevate how they're going to do that strategically, and let's elevate how they might measure success and make sure that the work the teams are doing are actually making an impact on their revenue, on their profit, on their employee engagement. So I thought that was a really interesting nuance to what strategy teams really bring. And especially if anyone's listening where they're maybe struggling to quantify what the strategy team are doing or the impact that they're making, actually it's about driving focus. It's about making an impact. It's about helping teams work on the right things that are actually going to move the needle of the business. And that can be really powerful. And obviously that's a crazy ROI. So maybe there's that element of being able to quantify what the team are doing as well.
I like that. I like kind of the take that you have there. And it almost reminds me of the strategy team or personnel being the voice of reason, truly challenging the internal teams to think critically, think with that growth mindset, and make sure that everything that you're doing is helping you on the path ahead. And I guess that is also another aspect of and a role of the strategy team, right? Is to make sure that the business is truly prioritizing and focused on the right areas, and to question if an activity or an initiative or a project doesn't actually move the needle on anything that you're doing. So yeah, I think that's a great point. And I guess in line with this, once we figured out the right strategic plan, the next step is ultimately execution, right? And developing those true detail-orientated action level plans. What does that mean for individual contributors? What are the specific responsibilities and kind of timelines and the resources that they need to accomplish that? And I think this is where governance also comes in. A strategy team needs to be a true steward of governance as well, making sure that the company is tracking things in the right way, making sure the right metrics are being fed in. And there's also a great cadence. Something that can get lost in the ether of business as usual is losing sight of that momentum that needs to be maintained. And I think a strategy team can definitely be the steward of making sure that execution is completed robustly. And I think this also varies by size of organization, Laura, because it can get a bit more complex when a business is much bigger in size with different business units and divisions. So I think the strategy team's role is also about figuring out what's right for this business at this point in time, but what also they should be striving towards.
Yeah, and I think it's funny when I think about strategy teams, I imagine them sat, in their office with the big calendar on the wall that's like, in January we've got rolling out targets, in March we've got, reviewing whether we've hit the targets, we've got midway through the year, pivoting the strategy, maybe reviewing it. We've got, board and investor packs. You've got annual reports that you need to publish on the website. Potentially if you're a public company, we've got, training new people. There's quite an extensive range of activities, people activities, financial activities, strategy, external. You've got offsites. There's all of these different facets depending on the business. And I think whether it's a digital or whether it is actually a calendar on the wall, but I really imagine the strategy team becoming incredibly organized around the milestones that they need to, or the calendar entries rather. But then for those calendar entries, you've got the milestones. If you're going to publish your board pack, you need to prepare it, you need to gather the data, and that happens months before. So one of those maybe underrated elements would be get organized, set your strategy calendar, map it out, communicate it, get everybody on board. Everybody should know those moments that are going to happen and when they might need to share their progress or their data. And that can be a really powerful way to anchor the year and make sure that you're organized for those moments.
I really like that. And maybe this is also where a big part of the team's responsibility is to empower those departments and teams also to work backwards, as you say, from these milestones. Make sure that we're staying on track with said milestones, helping to understand the tools, the resources, the data that will set them up for success as well. And I think without that almost, I guess, collaboration and preparation, a business can also fail, right? Or move away from achieving their strategy per se. And I think this is where the role of a strategy team or strategy personnel, it's also a big role, right?
Huge.
The more we talk about these, I think, God, it's a long list. But super, super critical to a business, especially in the growth era. I would argue in one of our previous episodes, we talked about a chief strategy officer. These are kind of aspirations for any business. And I think a strategy team is also something to make sure that you begin to kind of establish and build to empower the rest of your functions.
Yeah. And I think, you said about kind of the chief strategy officer, the strategy team, they are big roles. They are very influential. They can also be very impactful. But often what I see is that the strategy team role is part of another role at the beginning, and then it kind of morphs into a strategy team. So it's even more important to kind of get that organization, get your sort of list of things of how you're actually going to, tactically go through this process as you sort of evolve. I think probably the hardest piece is really that empowering teams, fostering sort of that collaborative culture, challenging ideas. that can be really, really hard. But I think creating the culture of strategic thinking is probably the single hardest thing that happens as part of this evolution. I'd love to talk a little bit around sort of how you can promote innovation, how you can help people explore new ideas, new technologies, new business models, how you sort of empower that continuous innovation. maybe, you've just started as a strategy team, or you've got it as part of your role, and then all of a sudden you find yourself facilitating brainstorming sessions or workshops, bringing functions together. That's kind of scary to work alongside your peers and then kind of try and rally the troops together, if you like. Do you have any pointers or tips for how someone might navigate that?
Yeah, and I agree. Also, by the way, that I think it is the hardest aspect, creating that culture. But what I would say is that the strategy team can provide mechanisms and also resources, frameworks to enable that and take the teams respectively on a journey. I think a strategic mindset shouldn't just be limited towards a strategy team or a strategy manager, strategy officer. It needs to be more widespread than that, and promoting innovation is something that needs to be enabled organically as well. It's also impossible to innovate under pressure, right? I would argue. I think that can also lead the business down a garden path that is hard to come back from. So providing the right tools, mechanisms is super important. And also developing that strategic awareness across the organization. How do you make sure that from top down, the leaders, the individual contributors are truly thinking with that strategic mindset and making sure they understand their own roles in achieving the long-term vision and what their kind of job is on the journey of strategy execution. And I think that's the part that takes time too. So if I think about a strategy team just kicking off, that's the big meat. That's the one that needs a solid plan behind it, and also the right buy-in from your supporting teams and leadership, I think. But more broadly than that, Laura, I think it also points in this direction of continuous evaluation and evolution, right? You have to continuously assess what the team is focused on. How do you make sure that you have regular feedback channels as well, and promote that continuous learning? So I don't know if you kind of have any thoughts around this. How does a strategy team really promote that evaluation and evolution?
I think something that I've seen work really successfully is considering the strategy team or the strategy manager, if it's a single person, of just being really open to supporting teams, maybe not beginning with too much opinion, but rather being that helping hand, that support as you sort of navigate this new period. And then as you become known as the supporting role, then you can bring in some element of opinion. You can bring in some element of fostering innovation. You can bring in data sets and external sort of perspectives, which again, sometimes just being an external voice can help you really refine that. So that's something that I've seen work really well. And I think, like you said, it is an evolution. It's a journey. You're not going to get all of this achieved in a month or two, but rather over time. Going back to what we said right at the beginning, is you establish your vision, your mission. What is it that you're really there to do? And I think once you've sort of set that, maybe your initial short-term goals are support the organization to just become a little bit more strategic. And then, maybe the 12-month goal is support the growth of the business. You can't, you can't kind of eat all of that at the beginning. So that would be kind of my thinking, is don't come in too heavy-handed, but really be a support arm, help people to evaluate, give them the tools and the frameworks which are readily available online, and give them to the teams and really help them to fulfill that. Also be there as a sort of helping hand to alleviate some of the pressure, alleviate some of that strategic thinking when people find it challenging to do on top of their daily role. So try not to get them to do too many things that are going to add to their role, but rather help it be complementary, I think would be my final tip.
I like that. And I think maybe taking it full circle too, Laura, is this is a great place to be in, where you've formed that strategy department. But I think wherever you ultimately are in your journey, you can still adopt some of these practices that we've discussed today. It's about figuring out what's right for your business at the time that you're in, and then setting yourself a vision for what you want to work towards as well.
Yeah, I love that.
Great.
Well, I think that wraps up today's session, or today's episode rather, on so you've created a strategy team, now what? Hopefully everybody found it insightful and that it helps you on your journey as you're building a strategy function out or growing a strategy function and helping you to better strategy execution.
And make sure to tune in next week where we'll be talking about another exciting topic. It's going to be another great episode, so we hope that you tune into that as well.
And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to the Ultimate Strategy Podcast on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode. Also, check out the links that we mentioned and the resources. Also, we have plenty of templates and frameworks on our website as well. So definitely check those out as you're navigating this building a strategic team. And a big thank you to Cascade, of course, for making this podcast possible.
And thank you for listening. And remember that great strategies are only as good as their execution.
So take action, make it happen, and see the results. See you in the next episode for your weekly dose of strategy.